Racial bias in education. What is racial bias? Dictionary definition is a particular tendency, trend, inclination, feeling, or opinion, especially one that has preconceived or unreasonable hostile feelings or opinions about a social group. The main issue: many students are stereotyped by their race and their intelligence level, which in fact have nothing to do with each other. How weird. Is this really politically correct? Sadly, in today's society, it is. On standardized tests, the section of the test where you choose your race could make someone uncomfortable. I believe that the section was created to maybe create a stereotype for the grader of the test before the individual actually grades it. In reality, it should not matter the race. I do not really understand why there is even a section to choose your race. This picture I used on our textual analysis paper, and the picture explains humor is to portray the topic of racial differences in order to not make it seem as serious as it is. The image is saying how the stereotypical black male student is not as intelligent as the white male student. And this is a video on NBC News about racial bias.
Defined by income and race or ethnicity. There have been a lot of efforts to make things right and even things up, including schools that are chasing for all students in ways that might even surprise some parents. Our report tonight from our chief education correspondent, Rahima Ellis.
Diallo hopes to be an explorer. Kari, perhaps a scientist.
Biologist.
Two 9-year-olds with big dreams in fourth-grade classrooms just feet apart, seen differently in the eyes of the state because of the color of their skin. That's because Black and Hispanic students have been trailing white students on standardized tests for years. To close that achievement gap, Congress passed the sweeping No Child Left Behind Act in 2001, mandating every student test at grade level by 2014, or schools risk being shut down.
100% of our students in 100% of our schools had to be proficient in mathematics and reading. Under that criteria, by the end of this school year, all of our schools would have been labeled as failing.
So many applied for waivers.
We worked on it for 6 months,
allowing states to keep federal funding if they meet certain benchmarks. Of the 35 granted, the majority include different academic targets for different races. In Washington, D.C., for example, 71% of Black and 77% of Hispanic students need to be proficient in math by 2017, compared to 94% of white students.
The intention in closing the achievement gap is the right one. We want to see that gap close, but lowering expectations for students of color is not the answer and sends the wrong message.
Some parents who find the targets troublesome say they understand the reasoning behind them.
It can sound like different standards, but hopefully what it is looking at where people are and bringing them up to the same standard.
Diallo Woods and his sisters attend D.C. public schools. While their parents support efforts to close the achievement gap, Nicole, also a teacher, finds the targets unsettling.
I'm not saying to myself, listen, this is what the white kids can do and this is what you can do. I would never do that to my children. And so to hold them to a bar that says you're only going to make it this far, that's discriminatory.
The superintendent of D.C. Public Schools says that's not the case.
The target for everyone is the same, which is a 50% increase in proficiency.
Some educators believe race-based targets focus attention on the uncomfortable reality that for generations, education hasn't always been equal for kids of different races. They say these targets help get resources to those who need them most.
Regardless of race, income, or socioeconomic status.
Don't leave those children out.
Exactly.
Educators, though, warn against mistaking short-term goals for long-term expectations.
We expect 100% from all of our kids, and so that is a goal that we hold and that we ask our staff to hold to.
To reach that goal, schools are providing extra support, including after-school tutoring.
The more I practice it, the better I get.
And it's one step toward helping all children achieve their full potential. Educators we spoke with say these race-based targets are necessary for now, and they are perhaps an imperfect approach to fixing a problem that has been decades in the making, Brian.
Well, what an interesting and important story in education tonight. Rahima, thank you, as always.
Should this racial bias be in schools of such much diversity? Standardized test scores often stereotype a student based on what they box check off in the race portion of the test. A white student is expected to get higher scores than a black student because of the racial bias in this country. Color doesn't matter. When it comes to intelligence, humor and images shows how race gives people something to talk about and make up untrue stereotypes about students. Articles explaining examples of racial upper hand regarding race really exemplifies the problem we have in the U.S. with the education system. Racial differences are no secret to society because racism is everywhere. At school, at the grocery store, in your backyard. Everywhere. Living without it, we wouldn't be the U.S.